Warning, this video contains horrific scenes of Cuphead bosses getting absolutely walloped. Just trounced on, completely dismantled. Any Cuphead boss apologist groups are asked to please look away now. Seriously though, this video contains clips of basically every boss in the new DLC, including the final one, but not including the secret one just in case somebody's played the DLC and is only now finding out that there is in fact a secret boss. If you haven't finished the DLC and want to go in with some amount of blindness, you should probably either stop watching this video or rip your eyes out, I guess. Both will technically achieve the same goal. Also, this channel is not for kids. It's not like super intense or anything, but my previous Cuphead videos attracted a lot of younger viewers and they expect my channel to be kids content or Cuphead only content. It's not. And even though it's marked as not for kids, I've gotten angry comments from parents chastising me for using the word hell in a game that features a location called Inkwell Hell. Okay, so if you're a kid, shoo, skedaddle, get out of here. You probably won't enjoy this kind of video anyways. If you're here after all that, then I hope you enjoy the video.
What are you most proud of when you look back at these last, it was announced in 2018, but, I'm sure y'all have been working on it longer than that. Like, what are you most proud of when you look back at the development cycle of this?
I can't pinpoint one thing other than the fact that we stayed true to quality over, things like timeline, budget, things like that. Like as a core value statement in the company is quality, quality, quality.
That's what everyone says though, right? I dare you to find any company, no matter how transparently evil and corrupted they come across, that has ever intentionally said, we prioritize quantity over quality. No one in the history of the world has ever said that about their own product. You can ask those YouTubers that pump out 4 15-minute long videos every day where they just yell at each other and throw slime, and they'll still try to convince you that their ultimate goal is quality. The difference here though is that when Maya Moldenhauer says it, more than anyone else who's ever said these words, I believe her. I don't think I've ever seen a studio, at least in the games industry, focus this solely on quality over anything else. That's not to say there aren't other quality developers, including ones that match or in some people's eyes exceed the quality of what Studio MDHR is doing. There seems to be this concept that gaming is dying and the big companies are destroying it with their greed, and the quality of games has drastically decreased over time, but as much as some companies are doing their best to hit horrible decision bingo, if you really believe that quality games aren't coming out at all times, you're looking in the wrong places. Not only are a ton of AAA developers still dedicated to good craftsmanship, it's pretty unbelievable that something as massive as God of War, for example, seems so personal, well-crafted, and lovingly made, but there are hundreds of indie games whose main priority is to deliver good products. You think Clay Entertainment doesn't make quality games? You think Team Cherry doesn't make quality games? You think Supergiant doesn't make quality games? Of course they do, and so do so many more like them. But when we're discussing this idea of quality and quantity, it's good to remember that it's not about one or the other like some people present it as. It's a slider. You can make a lot of really great games, you can make a lot of bad games, and you can release groundbreaking work every 6+ years. Thing is, as much as we treat this word like a bad thing, quantity is incredibly important for both developers and consumers. You think people would be happy if Silksong came out after all this time and was the greatest 3-hour game ever made? No. There would be riots in the street. The original Hollow Knight is incredible and polished, but will take even a seasoned vet dozens of hours to scrub through it all, and the same expectation is there for Silksong. That's quantity. Fans will always want more announcements, more games, longer games if there's something truly special. We can't help it. In an ideal world, we would have our favorite developers release a new game every single week as long as they somehow maintain the quality level they have now. It's completely impossible, but no one's asking for less good games just for the sake of it. It's just that if these devs did speed up their process, they'd lose what made them so great, so we'll accept the trade-off of fewer games. Every studio needs to hit their own balance, but it is a balance, which means that there are elements of both extremes in every studio. Some level of quantity is necessary. If I were to pick a single studio that comes closest to bookending this side though, one that seems like it truly, genuinely only ever makes what it wants to make with no regard for what anyone else thinks of it, it would have to be Studio MDHR. In just under 5 years, they created a DLC for which they had most of the groundwork, mechanics, and workflow down for already, which consisted of 1 small overworld map, 6 main bosses, 5 mini bosses, 3 new weapons, 3 new charms, 1 new character, and 1 secret boss. 5 years. Not that this is at all how it works, but in terms of the bosses, the main point of the game, that's a touch over 1 boss and 1 mini boss per year on average. That's insane. I mean, it's insane how I thought an average like that would be a legitimate stat to show, because if anyone working at the company saw this video, they'd laugh directly in my face for acting like it was, but also it's still mathematically true, so I'm still mathematically shocked. This DLC had been taking so long and had been delayed so many times that most people, including me, were wondering if it had just expanded in scope to the point that it was becoming a standalone game, and even if it wasn't, the assumption was that this island would rival the original game in terms of the amount of content it has, because that's what the industry has convinced us will happen. Unless a game is in development hell where ideas just just aren't sticking and it moves around constantly, this amount of time usually results in a lot more content than this. One quick look at the Lost Legacy or Silksong like I mentioned before, and you see these DLCs that just got bigger and bigger until the teams were like, screw it, let's just make this its own big thing. But from the looks of it, the scope of the Cuphead DLC didn't get exponentially bigger over time. It has 6 main bosses. Unless the original plan was to have like 2, they really did just take their time working on their small vision. But stuffed into that smaller scope is just as much work as they put into the base game. The team stated that roughly the same number of animations went into this DLC as went into the entirety of OG Cuphead, a game with 3 times as many bosses, 9 other mini-bosses, and a handful of run and gun levels. Apparently every boss phase in the DLC has more frames of animation than entire bosses in the main game. Now let me ask you this question. If you didn't know that these bosses in the Cuphead DLC had 3 times more frames of animation than those in the original game, would you have noticed it yourself? I mean, sure, I could see these having 3 times more than Inkwell 1 bosses, but the later ones? I mean, I'm not an animation genius, I'm also not a regular genius, I border on straight up stupid, but that's a different issue. The point is, I have no way of knowing this was 3 times the amount of work because it's hard for the average consumer to quantify that. I mean, they look incredible, these bosses are truly amazing to look at, and I can tell they are more complex, but it's difficult to convey just how much more you're getting with every second of this DLC than it would be to just have the same number of animations and 3 times as many bosses. The literal only reason you would put this much more into every moment of this game is if you, the creator, truly love what you're doing and want to make something that you'd be unbelievably proud of with no regard for if players will even notice. Here's the crazy truth about the situation. This DLC could have maintained the animation intensity level of the original and came out with the same content as what we got here 3 years ago, and nobody would have complained. In fact, it looks like that was what the original plan was. Not just that, but with this amount of time, they could have just made Miss Chalice the only main character, churned out as many bosses as the original had, and made this a Cuphead sequel called Miss Chalice. Same amount of content as the first one, all new bosses, this different form of collecting coins that isn't run and gun levels, plus since the animation time has been the main constraining factor of building these experiences, they also probably could have tossed a couple more charms and items into the mix. In roughly this amount of time, they could have just made a Cuphead sequel that matched the quality of the original, which is unreasonably high, by the way. It's not like base Cuphead was made by a bunch of crackpot developers creating stuff in MS Paint and putting it out into the world, and now they said, alright, let's put some actual effort into this one. No, Cuphead is literally famous for how much time and effort went into making it. The absolute love and care put into every millisecond of this experience has been given so much praise, and they decided, screw it, ×3 multiplier. I mean, goddamn, look at this. It's honestly kind of upsetting that so often you can't look closely at the background while playing because you're so focused on surviving, because watching this back, I mean, it's unbelievable. What studio do you know that could put out the absolute smash hit that Cuphead was, one of the greatest success stories in all of gaming, one of the most beloved indie games ever created, 5 million sales in 2 years while being largely exclusive in that time, and not even budge when it comes to expanding their studio? It's still tiny. They still had a maximum of 6 animators at any one time. I think the perfect quote to describe Studio MDHR is one regarding the timeline of the game's creation. If it takes longer for the game to come out, it takes longer. Who cares? I think the wording of this is super important. Most companies, when addressing delays or long wait times, lean more on the side of, we want to get our game in the hands of players as soon as possible, we know they're excited, but it needed more work. A perfectly fine thing to say, and usually a good mentality, but there's a deliberate mention of players' expectations. We know you're waiting, we're trying our best to make that wait as small as possible. Whereas this one's a pretty straightforward, flippant, who cares? Not in a we don't care about our fans kind of way, but in a we have a vision, we have autonomy over the creation of this game. What matters most is that vision is realized, and our employees who work in a field that takes on some of the worst amount of crunch in this industry are treated with respect and care and don't have to bleed themselves dry so people can get their hands on something 6 months earlier than they were still eventually gonna get it anyway kind of way. The full Cuphead project, the first game in its expansion at least, who knows if they make more in the future, took a total of 12 years give or take to develop. In those 12 years, the project was able to put out 25 total bosses, and for a game that almost entirely revolves around killing bosses, that's puny, and the ratio only got smaller in the second half. After 12 years of painstaking work, a seasoned player who doesn't die over the course of the game can completely scrub through every inch of it on normal in about an hour and a half. It's not that I want every studio to be like this. Like I said, quantity is important, and while every studio should slow down if they're pushing employees as far as they have been in the past, other than that, I'm okay if you're making your game super meaty and full of good content and pretty frequent when it comes to release schedules. Some studios can do that, and it's great. And Lord knows there have been other teams that have worked on a game for over a decade and try to perfect everything about it and make it as great as they possibly can, but there aren't a lot of teams that take their success and decide to continue forward by putting more in less. There aren't that many that shatter the boundaries of what's possible in games and then triple down on it for most people to not even recognize that time and effort. I'm sitting over here like that Kermit meme, the same way I was when Elden Ring came out, because well, back then I didn't want to play anything else because of how massive that game was and how much I wanted to explore it and experience its brilliance. Here I just don't have the motivation to play anything despite beating the DLC over a week ago, because I can't imagine anything else giving me an experience that would be remotely as fun as going through and beating these bosses for a 5th time. This hyper-focused product creates something so good that it almost ruins other games. That's how you know you've made something that almost transcends the medium. It's a little sad seeing reviews of this game saying, yeah, it's more Cuphead, there's not a lot of new stuff. They're all positive reviews, but what, a completely new type of battle presented in 5 unique ways, new charms and weapons that transform how the game is played, hidden secrets that feature a boss with a super unique mechanic, a whole new character that plays completely different and adds replayability to the whole experience, an orchestra that was twice the size as it was last time, and the absolute insane glow up for bosses that were already jaw-dropping to begin with isn't enough? I think Studio MDHR understands that it is. This is exactly what this DLC needed to be, and even if some people don't appreciate it, they thought it was way too long of a wait for way too little a package, or people did appreciate it but not as much as they by all accounts should have given how much went into this, it ultimately didn't matter, because they make this game for them, and their real only focus is on quality, quality, quality. Studio MDHR solidified themselves as one of my favorite developers ever already coming off this one project, but I'd like to hear some of your favorites too if you have any, especially indie studios. I named some of mine earlier, here's a few extras. I'm sure I'm probably missing one or two, but I'm always looking for more great companies whose work I can follow, so let me know who that is for you. I hope you all enjoyed the video. If you did, leave it a like. If you're new here, subscribe, and I'll see you all next time. Peace.